The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of the Afghan mountains as Staff Sergeant Jake adjusted his rifle scope for the third time. His SEAL team had been tracking a high-value target for 6 days through some of the most dangerous territory in the region. Intelligence reports indicated that Commander, a notorious Taliban leader responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces, was holed up in a compound just 2 kilometers ahead. Wiped the sweat from his brow despite the cool mountain air. Something felt wrong about this mission from the start. The intel had come through too easily, almost as if it was meant to be found. His team leader, Lieutenant Commander Sarah, had expressed similar concerns during their briefing, but orders were orders. The brass wanted captured or eliminated, and they wanted it done quickly. The 8-man SEAL team moved like ghosts through the mountainous landscape. Each member was a specialist in their own right, led from the front with 15 years of experience under her belt. Petty Officer Williams handled communications and electronics. Hospital Corpsman Second Class David served as their medic. The rest of the team consisted of seasoned operators who had completed multiple tours in various combat zones. Served as the team's designated marksman, carrying an SR-25 semi-automatic sniper rifle. His reputation for precision shooting had earned him respect throughout the special operations community. During his last deployment, he had made a record-breaking shot at 1,200 meters that saved an entire Marine unit from being overrun. But today, something in his gut told him that his skills would be tested beyond anything he had faced before. As they approached the target area, called for a halt. Through her binoculars, she studied the compound ahead. It was a typical Afghan dwelling, made of mud brick walls with a flat roof. Several smaller buildings surrounded the main structure, creating a natural defensive position. What troubled her was the complete absence of any visible activity. No guards, no movement, not even the usual signs of daily life like cooking smoke or children playing. Williams crouched beside a large boulder and began setting up his communication equipment. His job was to maintain contact with their base and coordinate any necessary support. The team had been operating under radio silence for most of the mission to avoid detection, but now they needed to report their position and prepare for the assault. Checked his medical supplies one more time. As the team's corpsman, he carried enough equipment to treat serious injuries in the field. His training had saved countless lives over the years, but he always felt the weight of responsibility that came with being the only medical professional in the group. The remoteness of their location meant that any serious casualties would have to be treated on the spot. Found a position on a ridge that overlooked the compound. From here, he could provide overwatch for his teammates as they moved in for the capture operation. His rifle was loaded with match-grade ammunition, and he had already calculated the distance, wind speed, and elevation adjustments needed for accurate shots at the compound. Through his scope began a systematic scan of the area. Years of training had taught him to look for anything out of place. A glint of metal that might be a weapon, a shadow that didn't belong, or movement that seemed unnatural. What he saw made his blood run cold. Hidden in the rocks above the compound were at least 15 armed fighters. They had positioned themselves perfectly to create a killing field around the target building. Anyone approaching the compound would be caught in a deadly crossfire with no escape route. This wasn't just a simple capture mission anymore. It was a carefully planned ambush. Immediately activated his radio to warn his team, but before he could speak, the crackling voice of Williams came through his earpiece. The communications specialist had intercepted enemy radio chatter indicating that their position had been compromised. The Taliban fighters were already moving into position, and the SEAL team was walking directly into a trap. Made the decision to abort the mission and begin immediate extraction. But as the team started to fall back, the sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions around them. The enemy had anticipated their retreat route and cut off their escape. Bullets whined overhead as the SEALs dove for cover behind rocks and sparse vegetation. The situation had gone from bad to worse in a matter of seconds. The team was outnumbered at least 3-1, caught in unfamiliar terrain with limited cover. Their extraction helicopter was still 40 minutes away, and they would have to survive until then. Realized that his role had just shifted from providing overwatch to being the team's lifeline in an impossible situation. As enemy fighters began to close in from multiple directions, settled into his shooting position and began to calculate his first shot. The distance to the nearest enemy position was approximately 400 meters, well within his effective range. But with multiple targets moving through rocky terrain and his teammates pinned down below, every shot would have to count. The legendary sniper shot that would save his team was about to begin, though didn't know it yet. All he knew was that 8 lives depended on his ability to buy them time and keep the enemy at bay until help could arrive. The mission had become about survival, and was the only one in position to tip the odds in their favor. The first shot fired struck an enemy fighter who was attempting to flank the SEAL team from the eastern ridge. The 7.6 Tomb bullet found its mark at 380 meters, and the fighter dropped immediately. Quickly cycled the bolt and shifted his aim to the next target. In situations like this, speed and accuracy were equally important. Below him, his teammates were fighting for their lives, had managed to find cover behind a large rock formation, and was directing the team's defensive positions. Williams was calling desperately for immediate air support while returning fire with his M4 carbine. Was treating Petty Officer, who had taken shrapnel to his leg from a rocket-propelled grenade that exploded nearby. The enemy fighters seemed to have an endless supply of ammunition and were using their superior numbers to maintain constant pressure on the pinned SEAL team. Could see muzzle flashes from at least 12 different positions, and more fighters were moving up through the mountain passes to reinforce the attack. Second shot eliminated a machine gunner who had been raking the SEAL position with devastating fire. The distance was nearly 450 meters and had to account for the crosswind that was gusting through the mountain valley. The shot struck center mass, and the heavy machine gun fell silent. His voice crackled through his earpiece, urgent but controlled. The team was running low on ammunition, and his injury was more serious than initially thought. Needed to perform immediate surgery to stop the bleeding, but he couldn't work while under constant fire. Realized he had to create a wider buffer zone around his teammates. Moving to a new position to avoid counter-sniper fire, spotted a group of 3 fighters attempting to use a dried riverbed to get within grenade range of the SEAL position. The riverbed provided excellent concealment, but had the elevation advantage. His third shot dropped the lead fighter at 340 meters, causing the other 2 to retreat. The tactical situation was becoming clearer too as he continued to engage targets. This wasn't a random ambush by local fighters. The enemy positions had been carefully planned and coordinated. Someone had leaked their mission details, allowing the Taliban to prepare this elaborate trap. The fighters were using military tactics and had positioned themselves with overlapping fields of fire that would have been devastating against a less experienced team. His fourth shot targeted an enemy sniper who had been trying to locate his position. The counter-sniper was approximately 520 meters away, partially concealed behind a rock outcropping. Had only caught a glimpse of the rifle barrel, but his experience told him exactly where the shooter would be positioned. The shot was perfect, eliminating the threat before the enemy sniper could get a bead on any of the SEALs. Williams finally received confirmation that close air support was inbound, but the aircraft wouldn't arrive for another 25 minutes. The team had to hold their position and survive until then. Knew that his ammunition supply was limited, and he would have to make every round count. The enemy fighters began to adapt to his presence, using smoke grenades and coordinated movement to make targeting more difficult. Watched as they attempted a concentrated assault on the western flank, where Petty Officer Jackson was holding a critical position alone. Jackson was an explosive ordnance disposal specialist, not a rifleman, and he was being overwhelmed. Shifted his entire position, moving 50 meters to the north to get a better angle on the attacking fighters. This exposed him to potential counterfire, but Jackson needed immediate support. His fifth and sixth shots came in rapid succession, dropping 2 fighters who were advancing on Jackson's position with assault rifles. Had managed to stabilize condition, but the team medic reported that they needed immediate medical evacuation. The shrapnel had damaged an artery and was losing blood faster than could replace it with IV fluids. The mission had gone from bad to critical, and was the only thing standing between his team and complete disaster. As prepared for his 7th shot, he noticed movement on the ridge above the compound. More fighters were arriving as reinforcements, and they were carrying heavy weapons, including what appeared to be a rifle. If that weapon made it into position, it could destroy the rock formations that were providing cover for the SEAL team. Calculated the distance to the weapons team at 630 meters, near the maximum effective range of his rifle. The shot would require perfect technique and a bit of luck. He controlled his breathing, adjusted for wind and elevation, and squeezed the trigger. The weapon's loader dropped, causing the heavy rifle to tumble down the mountainside. Reported that ammunition was critically low across the team. Most of the SEALs were down to their last few magazines, and the enemy seemed to have unlimited supplies. Realized that his role was evolving from providing precision fire support to being the primary deterrent keeping the enemy from overrunning their position entirely. The sound of helicopter rotors in the distance gave the team hope, but could see through his scope that the enemy fighters were preparing for one final assault before air support could arrive. They were massing forces on multiple sides, preparing to overwhelm the SEAL position with sheer numbers. Knew that the most critical shot of his career was approaching. Everything depended on his ability to disrupt the enemy's final assault and buy his team the precious minutes they needed for rescue to arrive. The legendary shot that would save his teammates was about to unfold, and prepared himself for the most challenging engagement of his military career. Watched through his scope as approximately 20 enemy fighters began coordinating their final assault. They had learned from their earlier attempts and were now using proper military tactics. Small groups were advancing under covering fire while others provided suppression. The SEAL team's defensive perimeter was about to be tested beyond its breaking point. His voice came through, earpiece with increasing urgency. Jackson had been hit in the shoulder and was having difficulty returning fire. Williams was down to his last magazine while trying to guide in the approaching helicopter, was splitting his attention between treating and providing covering fire. The team was holding together through pure professionalism, but they were reaching their limits. Identified the enemy leader coordinating the assault. The man was positioned approximately 580 meters away, using hand signals to direct the attacking fighters. He wore different equipment than the others and carried himself with the confidence of an experienced commander. Realized that eliminating this target could disrupt the entire enemy attack. The shot would be extremely challenging. The target was partially concealed behind rocks, only exposing himself briefly to give commands. Would have to time his shot perfectly, accounting for wind, elevation, and the target's movement pattern. He studied the commander's behavior for several minutes, noting that the man exposed himself every 30 seconds to observe his fighter's progress. Steadied his rifle and controlled his breathing. Years of training had taught him to find calm in the middle of chaos. Around him, bullets were striking rocks and kicking up dust, but he focused entirely on his target. When the enemy commander next exposed himself, was ready. The shot traveled 580 meters through mountain air, striking the enemy leader center mass. The immediate effect was visible through scope as the coordinated assault began to fall apart. Without their commander's direction, the attacking fighters started making tactical errors and losing cohesion. But didn't have time to celebrate. More enemy reinforcements were arriving from multiple directions, and some of them appeared to be carrying advanced weapons systems. Through his scope, could see what looked like shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles. The approaching helicopter would be in serious danger if those weapons made it into firing position. Began engaging the weapons teams with rapid precision fire. His 8th shot dropped a fighter carrying an SA-7 missile at 420 meters. His 9th shot eliminated the missile operator's spotter. But more weapons teams were moving into position and realized he was fighting a losing battle against their numbers. Made the tactical decision to attempt a fighting withdrawal to a more defensible position higher up the mountain. The team began moving by bounds, with half providing covering fire while the other half moved. Shifted his position to maintain overwatch of their movement, but the new angle exposed him to enemy fire. A bullet struck the rock inches from his head, showering him with stone fragments. An enemy sniper had finally located his position and was attempting to eliminate him. Had to move immediately, but doing so would leave his team without precision fire support during their most vulnerable moment. Made the decision to stay in position long enough to cover his team's withdrawal, even though it meant accepting significant personal risk. He located the enemy sniper approximately 480 meters away and engaged him with his 10th shot. The return fire stopped, but knew that other enemy marksmen were searching for him. As the SEAL team moved up the mountain, they came under intense fire from a heavy machine gun positioned on a ridge above them. The weapon was perfectly placed to stop their withdrawal, and the team was caught in the open with minimal cover. could see through his scope that his teammates were pinned down and taking casualties. His voice came through the radio reporting that Jackson had been hit again, this time seriously. The explosive ordnance specialist was unconscious and bleeding heavily. The team couldn't move him under the current level of enemy fire, but staying in their exposed position meant certain death. Identified the machine gun position at 650 meters, near the maximum effective range of his weapon. The crew was well concealed behind sandbags and rocks, exposing only the weapon's muzzle and brief glimpses of the operators. Would need multiple shots to eliminate the threat, and each shot would give away his position to other enemy fighters. His 11th shot targeted the machine gun's primary operator. The bullet struck the fighter in the head, causing the heavy weapon to fall silent momentarily. But within seconds, another crew member had taken over the gun and resumed firing at the trapped SEAL team. His 12th shot eliminated the second operator, but he could see a third crew member moving to take control of the weapon. Realized that he needed to disable the gun itself rather than continuing to target the operators. His 13th shot struck the machine gun's receiver, damaging the weapon beyond use. With the machine gun silenced, was able to get her team moving again. They reached a more defensible position among larger rocks that provided better cover from multiple directions, but could see that enemy fighters were already moving to surround the new position. The SEAL team had bought themselves time, but they were still outnumbered and running critically low on ammunition. The sound of rotors was getting louder, indicating that air support was finally approaching. Could see the helicopter in the distance, but enemy fighters with shoulder-fired missiles were moving into position to engage it. Realized that his most critical shots were still ahead of him. He had already fired 13 rounds and had limited ammunition remaining. Each subsequent shot would have to be perfect, not just accurate but strategically decisive. The legendary shot that would save his team was approaching, and prepared himself for the most important moment of his military career. The approaching helicopter was an AH-64 Apache attack helicopter, but could see through his scope that enemy fighters were setting up multiple missile positions to bring it down. 3 different teams had shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles, and they were positioning themselves at various points around the mountain to ensure at least one would have a clear shot at the aircraft. Faced an impossible choice. He had only 4 rounds remaining in his rifle, and there were 3 missile teams plus dozens of other enemy fighters still threatening his pinned teammates. Mathematical logic suggested that he couldn't possibly eliminate all the threats, but had built his reputation on making impossible shots when they mattered most. The nearest missile team was approximately 440 meters away, positioned on a rocky ledge that gave them an excellent view of the approaching helicopter's flight path. Could see the operator preparing the SA-7 missile system while his spotter searched the sky for the target. This team had to be eliminated first, as they were closest to firing position. His 14th shot struck the missile operator in the chest, sending the expensive weapon system tumbling down the mountainside. The spotter immediately tried to retrieve the missile, but his 15th shot eliminated him before he could reach the weapon. 2 rounds remaining, 2 missile teams still active. The second missile team was positioned approximately 590 meters away, near the maximum effective range of his rifle. The team was well concealed behind large boulders and could only catch occasional glimpses of them as they moved. The Apache helicopter was now visible to everyone on the mountain, flying directly into the potential kill zone. Studied the second missile team's position carefully. They had chosen their location well, with multiple layers of rock providing protection from different angles, but noticed that they had to expose themselves to get a clear shot at the helicopter. When the missile operator raised the SA-7 to his shoulder, was ready. The shot traveled 590 meters through difficult mountain air. Had to account for elevation changes, wind patterns, and the target's movement all while under pressure from enemy small arms fire. The bullet struck the missile operator just as he was preparing to fire, sending the missile wild into the mountainside where it exploded harmlessly. 1 round remaining, 1 missile team still active, and dozens of enemy fighters still threatening his teammates. The third missile team was positioned approximately 720 meters away, well beyond the normal effective range of SR-25 rifle. The distance alone would make the shot extremely difficult, but the target was also positioned on a different ridge entirely, requiring to account for complex wind patterns and elevation changes across the intervening valley. Studied the shot carefully. At this range, bullet drop would be significant, and any miscalculation would result in a complete miss. The target was partially concealed behind rocks and would have only a brief window when the missile operator exposed himself to aim at the helicopter. Through his scope, could see the Apache pilot beginning evasive maneuvers, indicating that the crew had spotted the remaining missile threat. But the helicopter was still approaching the landing zone where it needed to pick up the wounded SEAL team members. The pilot was flying directly into danger to save teammates. Made final adjustments to his scope, accounting for the extreme range and environmental factors. He controlled his breathing and settled into the most stable shooting position possible. Years of training and experience had prepared him for this moment, but the shot would still require perfect execution and considerable luck. The enemy missile operator raised the SA-7 to his shoulder and began tracking the approaching helicopter. Could see through his scope that the man was moments away from firing. This was the shot that would determine whether his team lived or died. Squeezed the trigger, sending his final round across the mountain valley. The bullet traveled for what seemed like an eternity before finding its target at 720 meters. The missile operator dropped, and the SA-7 clattered uselessly among the rocks. But its ammunition was now completely exhausted, and enemy fighters were still advancing on his teammates' position. The Apache helicopter was beginning its approach to extract the wounded SEALs, but small arms fire was still intense. Realized that his role had shifted from sniper to forward observer, helping guide the helicopter's defensive fire. Activated his radio and began providing target information to the Apache crew. His elevated position allowed him to see enemy fighters that were concealed from the helicopter's view. Called out targets by distance and direction, enabling the Apache's 30 cannon to engage threats with devastating accuracy. The combination of spotting and the Apache's firepower quickly turned the tide of battle. Enemy fighters who had been advancing confidently suddenly found themselves under attack from a heavily armed helicopter guided by precision intelligence from its overwatch position. His team was able to reach the helicopter landing zone with carrying the unconscious Jackson and Williams supporting the wounded. Provided continuous updates on enemy positions to ensure the extraction could proceed safely. The Apache's door gunner laid down suppressive fire while the wounded SEALs were loaded aboard. Was the last team member to reach the helicopter, sprinting down the mountain while enemy fighters attempted to prevent his escape. Bullets struck the ground around him as he ran, but the Apaches covering fire kept the enemy at bay. Dove into the helicopter just as it began lifting off. As the Apache gained altitude and flew away from the ambush site, looked back at the mountain where he had just fought the most important battle of his career. 16 precision shots had turned an impossible situation into a successful extraction. His teammates were alive, the mission was complete, and the legendary sniper shot had become reality. 3 hours after the helicopter extraction, sat in the medical facility at Airbase watching doctors work on his wounded teammates. Was in surgery to repair the artery damage from shrapnel, but the medical team was optimistic about his recovery. Jackson had regained consciousness and was being treated for 2 gunshot wounds to his shoulder and arm. Both men would survive and eventually return to duty. The debriefing session that followed revealed the full scope of what had happened on the mountain. Intelligence analysts confirmed that the mission had been compromised from the beginning. A Taliban intelligence network had learned about the planned operation and set up an elaborate ambush designed to eliminate an entire SEAL team. Over 40 enemy fighters had participated in the attack, making it one of the largest coordinated ambushes against special operations forces in the region. Shooting performance was analyzed shot by military experts. 16 rounds fired, 15 confirmed kills at ranges from 340 to 720 meters. The final shot that eliminated the missile operator was particularly noteworthy, as it exceeded the normal effective range of the SR-25 rifle system by over 200 meters. Ballistics experts calculated that the bullet had traveled for over 2 seconds before reaching its target. Lieutenant Commander submitted a detailed report recommending for the Silver Star, the nation's 3rd highest military decoration for valor in combat. Her report stated that precision shooting had single-handedly prevented the annihilation of the entire 8-man SEAL team and enabled the successful extraction of wounded personnel under impossible conditions. The helicopter crew that had performed the extraction also submitted statements supporting award recommendation. The Apache pilot reported that target information had been critical to the success of the rescue operation. Without precise intelligence about enemy positions, the helicopter crew would have been fighting blind against a well-concealed enemy force. Word of performance spread quickly through the special operations community. The 720-meter shot that eliminated the final missile threat became the stuff of legend among snipers and special operations personnel. Military instructors began using this engagement as a case study in precision shooting under extreme pressure. Himself remained characteristically modest about his performance. During interviews with investigating officers, he emphasized the teamwork that had made the mission successful. His leadership had kept the team together under impossible pressure. Williams had maintained communications and guided in support, had saved lives with his medical expertise. Every team member had contributed to their survival. The investigation into how the mission had been compromised revealed serious security breaches within the intelligence community. Several Afghan nationals who had access to operational planning were identified as Taliban sympathizers. Changes were made to operational security procedures to prevent similar compromises in the future. Returned to full duty 6 months after the mission, with no permanent disabilities from his injuries. Jackson required additional surgery, but was able to continue his career as an explosive ordnance disposal specialist. Both men credited shooting with saving their lives and enabling their eventual recovery. Was awarded the Silver Star in a ceremony attended by senior military leadership from multiple branches of service. The citation specifically mentioned his extraordinary heroism and exceptional marksmanship under enemy fire, and noted that his actions had prevented the loss of an entire special operations team. The award ceremony was also attended by the Apache helicopter crew that had performed the extraction. The pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Maria Santos, spoke about the critical importance of spotting during the rescue operation. She stated that precise target information had enabled the helicopter crew to provide effective support while minimizing risk to the aircraft and crew. Following the mission, was selected for assignment to the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, an elite unit responsible for the most sensitive special operations missions. His reputation as one of the military's premier precision marksmen had been established through his performance during the ambush. The tactical lessons learned from the mission were incorporated into training programs throughout the special operations community. Military academies began teaching courses on long-range precision shooting using engagement as the primary example. The importance of maintaining overwatch positions and the value of precision marksmanship were reinforced throughout military training programs. Years later, continued to serve in various special operations roles, but he never again faced a situation as desperate as the mountain ambush. His legend grew within the military community, and young snipers studied his techniques and decision-making process. The story of the SEAL team that survived an impossible ambush became one of the most celebrated examples of military heroism and tactical excellence. Eventually retired from military service and became an instructor at advanced shooting schools, passing on his knowledge to the next generation of military marksmen. His students learned not just shooting techniques, but the mental discipline and tactical thinking that had enabled him to save his teammates when they were outnumbered and facing certain death. The mountain where the ambush occurred was later secured by coalition forces and turned into a forward operating base. A small memorial was erected to commemorate the battle, noting that it was the site where exceptional courage and marksmanship had triumphed over overwhelming odds. His legendary shots had become part of military history, inspiring countless service members who followed in his footsteps.